Yasher Koach to all of you who made it here tonight.
It's free.
All of you who declined your various Hanukkah party invitations for tonight to come to the class and trudged through the snow. So thank you all for coming, and thank you for all those who, if you couldn't make it, are joining online. We are beginning today Iggeres HaKodesh Siman Gimel, which is on page Kuf Daled, which is opposite of page 206. When we started learning Iggeres HaKodesh, so I mentioned that most of the letters in Iggeres HaKodesh are about tzedakah. We learned 2 letters so far, and you may have noticed that neither of them was about tzedakah. The first one was about Torah Shebal Peh and about davening. The next one was about the attitude the Chassidim should have after the Alter Rebbe's release from prison. Katonti, correct. But now we are going to start a string of letters on the topic of tzedakah. Yeah, so Gimel is about tzedakah, and Dalet is about tzedakah. And where's Hey? Hey is about tzedakah. Vav is about tzedakah.
Why is there an emphasis to tzedakah?
Zayin is somewhat about tzedakah. Ches is about tzedakah.
The whole thing's about tzedakah.
Tes is about tzedakah. Yeah. Yud is about tzedakah. Yud Aleph is not about tzedakah. Yud Beis is again about tzedakah. Yeah, so we're having a bunch of letters about tzedakah. The reason why is, as I mentioned, is because the Alter Rebbe took upon himself to support the Kehillah of Chassidim in Eretz Yisrael. I mentioned that Remendel Haradakar, Remendel of Vitebsk went up to Eretz Yisrael with several hundred families of Chassidim. The Alter Rebbe undertook to support them. So the Alter Rebbe would send huge sums of money every year to the Kehillah, the Yishuv in Eretz Yisrael. Sorry?
That's why he was arrested.
That was one of the excuses they gave when he was arrested. Right. That was one of the, yeah.
Because it was under the Turks. Yeah,
right.
That's what he said last week.
That wasn't the why, but that was one of the excuses that they came up with. And the Alter Rebbe would write every single year, he would write a letter about tzedakah, a fundraising letter. But it wasn't copy and paste. It wasn't, and this year we need money again. But as I said, that every one of the Alter Rebbe's letters about tzedakah contain profound and very deep ideas. It's interesting about the Alter Rebbe. When he wanted to get across what seems to be a simple message, it's almost like the Alter Rebbe didn't know how to write a simple message. Like, you think about it. In the last letter, the Alter Rebbe wrote, the Rebbe wanted the Chassidim to be humble. He wanted that, despite their victory and despite his release from prison, that they should behave and comport themselves in a humble, modest way. So write that. No. It's the whole huge chidushim on a pasuk ketointi, and there are 2 pirushim. There's a Ramban and there's a Rashi. The Alter Rebbe has a 3rd pirush and explains the whole concept of a chesed is in kedusha, chesed is in klipa. So the Alter Rebbe, whatever he wrote, was with incredible depth. So every year the Alter Rebbe would write a letter encouraging the Chassidim to give tzedakah. These letters aren't dated. In the Sefer Iggeres Kodesh of the Alter Rebbe, this is Iggeres HaKodesh. Then there's a Sefer where they publish with all the Alter Rebbe's letters that we have in existence today. And these letters are in there also. But there are many more than what's printed here in Tanya. There they print all the letters that we have. So over there, the editor of that volume, who was a bibliograph and historian, tries to figure out when each letter was written. And he comes up with a presumed date for each letter. Some letters we know when they were printed, like the letter Katonti. We know it was printed after Yitas Kislev and Tavkuf Nuntas in 1798. This letter was written probably around the same period of time, but every year there was a letter. For a matter of, 20 years, 25 years, the Alter Rebbe would send a letter every single year. And as mentioned, it was because the Chassidim needed encouragement, because they themselves were not the wealthiest. And the Alter Rebbe then would send an agent, an emissary, a meshulach, to go around to all the different cities and collect the amount, because every single city had to give a certain amount, and every single individual had to give a certain amount. There was pledges that were given, and every year that money was then sent to Eretz Yisrael. It was a whole big operation. It wasn't like today. Couldn't cash app the money, couldn't send PayPal. Right? Today you could, in 2 seconds, you want to send Hanukkah geld to someone overseas, you just push your cash app button, boom. And that person has it. But then it was a major operation which the Alter Rebbe undertook. I want to start off with a story today. A story that the Frierdiker Rebbe says, which illustrates the devotion of the Hasidim to the various tzedakahs of the Alter Rebbe. So although the Alter Rebbe, he gave out, there was this yearly collection for Eretz Yisrael, which, by the way, if any of you have ever heard of a tzedakah called Koil Chabad. Okay? Well known. Koil Chabad began by the Alter Rebbe. This tzedakah, all these letters, the Alter Rebbe is collecting for Koil Chabad.
In Eretz Yisrael.
In Eretz Yisrael, yeah. Koil Chabad was originally that tzedakah was instituted by the Alter Rebbe to support the poor people in Eretz Yisrael. I would say the poor former people, but there weren't any Freie people. This was before Zionism. The only ones who went up, who was in Eretz Yisrael, you had Arabs and you had the Chassidim. Later also you had some Talmidei Hagra that went up. But, and then this koilel went, it lasted throughout the years. Always been about supporting the Chassidim in Eretz Yisrael. And it exists till this very day. Koilel Chabad. Koilel Chabad is not a koilel as we know what a koilel is. You're not supporting people who are sitting and learning all day. It's a name for tzedakah. There were many different koilels back then, actually. I don't know why, but tzedakahs, communities, and the raising money for communities were called koilels. Till today you have it also. You have koilel Shemei Achoimis and koilel Remeir Balhanes. These aren't koilels in the conventional sense of the word, but these were different tzedakahs. So koilel Chabad is what Alter Rebbe was raising for. But Alter Rebbe also raised for other things. On an ad hoc basis when there were needs. Sometimes there was a pidyon shvuyim needed. Sometimes there was a need for individual poor people. Sometimes the Alter Rebbe was raising actually for himself. In other words, to build up, there was expenses that were necessary for the Achnasas Archim, for the Chassidim that would come to visit. It cost a lot of money to be able to run an operation and host all the hundreds and thousands of Chassidim that came. So Alter Rebbe would raise money for various causes. And the following story, which the Frierdiker Rebbe says, is about one of these fundraisers that the Alter Rebbe made. But first, there was a chassid whose name was Reb Gavriel Noach. Reb Gavriel. His name was Reb Gavriel. So again, there's a story whose name was a chassid whose name was Reb Gavriel. He lived in the city of Vitebsk, and he was actually older than the Alter Rebbe. He was around 10 years older than the Alter Rebbe. When the Alter Rebbe was 15, the Alter Rebbe got married to the daughter of one of the wealthy people in Vitebsk. His father-in-law's name was Rabbi Yehuda Leib Segal. And the Alter Rebbe at that point already was renowned to be an incredible goyin. And he settled in the city of Vitebsk. A few years later, when he settled over there, so he became very renowned amongst the Laimdim and the Talmidei Chacham in the city. It was a big city, and people would address their many questions to him, whether in Gemara, whether in Agadata, whether in Tanakh. He was a Isha Ashkelis, and everyone knew that they can get their answers to their questions from the Alter Rebbe. You have to remember, we're talking about the Alter Rebbe. He was 15 years old, because already 2-3 years later, he already went off to the Mezritcher Magid. He left Vitebsk. He got his wife's permission, and he went off to learn by the Magid of Mezritch. And when he came back a little while later, now he's a chassid. They say that when the Alter Rebbe, he was debating where to go to, whether to go to Mezritch to learn by the Magid, or to go to Vilna to learn by the Goyen. And he said, in Vilna they teach you how to learn. In Mezritch they teach you how to daven. I already know how to learn, so I'm going to Mezritch. He comes back a few years later, he's a chassid, and he encountered a lot of resistance. At that time, the hisnagdus, the opposition to chassidus, was very, very strong. In fact, his father-in-law also was one of his detractors. His father-in-law was very unhappy. You can imagine his father-in-law married off his daughter to this incredible goyin and ilui, and now the son-in-law
Went off the derech.
He went off the derech. He becomes a chassid. Very, very disappointing.
He went off the derech, that's it.
And his father-in-law was even strongly encouraged to have his daughter divorce the Alter Rebbe. Now the Alter Rebbe, and for the purposes of our story, this Rebbe Gavriel, whose last name, by the way, was Prager. His grandfather was from Prague, so he was called Prager. So this Rabbi Gavriel, he was yet still, when before the Alter Rebbe went off to Mezrich, he was one of the Talmidei Chachamim who would consult with the Alter Rebbe a lot. He had a lot of respect for the Alter Rebbe. The Alter Rebbe told the Bezdin of the city of Vitebsk, thank you so much, told the Bezdin of the city of Vitebsk that you have questions and issues with what I'm doing and the ways of the Baal Shem Tov. I'm willing to hold a public debate. And everything is open for discussion. And anyone has any issues or any problems and thinks there's the ways of the Baal Shem Tov are problematic, I'm willing to discuss it. And the Bezdin actually agreed to that, and for a full week there was a debate. Alter Rebbe debated many of the opponents of Chassidim for a full week. And by the time that week had ended, so many of the people in the city were convinced by the Alter Rebbe, became Chassidim, although many still remained very strong opponents. And this Rabbi Gavriel, he was one of the people who became Chassidim. He became a Chassid of the Alter Rebbe. And he was the only one in his family who became a Chassid of the Alter Rebbe. And his father was opposed to him, and his in-laws were opposed to him. His father-in-law wasn't alive at that time, but his brothers-in-laws and his brothers, everyone was opposed to him. But he wasn't deterred, and he became a Chassid of the Alter Rebbe. When the Alter Rebbe moved off to Liyazhna, where he became the Maggid of Liyazhna, so one of the Alter Rebbe's names is the Liyazhner Maggid. He became the Maggid of Liyazhna. He would go. The Alter Rebbe lived in Liyazhna until he was arrested. After he was arrested, he moved to the city of Liadi, which is why he's known as Rishner Zalman of Liadi. But he would go visit the Alter Rebbe from time to time, and he became a Chassid. And he suffered an incredible amount of harassment and even persecution. And financial persecution because of the fact that he was a chassid, including from his own family. His own family also were part of the people who were making for him tzaras. He was a relatively wealthy person, at least when this all started. And whenever the Alter Rebbe would hold a fundraiser, the Alter Rebbe would assess him for a nice amount of money. But his business started going downhill, because people were actually out to undermine his business. But he never mentioned anything to the Alter Rebbe. He was a true chassid, and he didn't want to bother the Alter Rebbe with trivialities such as about his business. There was another triviality, which is that he and his wife were married for 25 years and they did not have any children. He did not mention that to the Alter Rebbe either, because to him it was all about Avodas Hashem, and he didn't want to burden the Alter Rebbe with anything else. The day comes, and a message or a messenger comes from the Alter Rebbe that the Alter Rebbe is collecting for Pidyon Shvuyim, and he had been assessed for a certain amount. The Alter Rebbe assessed that he should give a certain amount of this tzedakah. And he didn't have the money. He didn't have the money. He comes home to that night, and his wife, her name was Chana Rivka, his wife sees that her husband doesn't look too good. So she says, "What's going on? What happened?" So apparently he hadn't been so straight with his wife either. In other words, he didn't want to tell her also about the extent of the problems. So, but now he opened up and he told his wife, "Listen, the Alter Rebbe just sent me. He needs this and this amount of me for tzedakah. I don't have the money, and business isn't doing well, and I don't know what to do." So his wife chided him, says, "You're a chassid. Where's the simcha? Where's the betachon? Absolutely, we're going to do it." She went, she took some of her jewelry and some of her pearls, and she pawned them, and she got money. She gave her husband, she comes home, she gives her husband a sealed packet, and she says, "Here is the entire amount of money for the Alter Rebbe. Go give it to the Alter Rebbe. Go to Liyazhna." He says, "What do I have to go to Liyazhna for?" Every time what the Alter Rebbe does is first he sends a message that he needs the money, and then he sends a messenger to come and collect the money. I'll wait for the messenger. But meanwhile, in the next few days, one of his brothers actually lodged a complaint against the government against him, making some sort of complaint about the way he was doing his business, and he got scared. And he was scared that this would cost him a tremendous amount, and that he'd be fined, and that he wouldn't be able to pass the test of, if the money was in his house, he was scared that he would use it. He stood up, he took the money and went to the Alter Rebbe. Went into the Alter Rebbe's room, gave him the envelope which his wife had given him, and said, "Here's the money." Alter Rebbe says, "Why didn't you wait for the why are you coming yourself?" So he told the Rebbe, "I'll tell you the truth. The business isn't going well. And he explained why the business isn't going well. And I was worried that I'm going to that they're going to hit me with a very big fine, and I was worried that this money, either I wouldn't be able to hold myself back, or maybe even they would find the money. So I wanted to come quickly and give it to the Rebbe. So the Rebbe told him, please open up the envelope. So Rabbi Gabriel opens up the envelope and he pours out his contents on the table, and it was coins. It was gold coins or silver coins. And amazingly, the coins were sparkling like the day they were minted. They were shiny and sparkling. The Alter Rebbe asked Rabbi Gabriel, what's this all about? He says, I don't know. The Alter Rebbe put his head down in his arms and entered a state of dveikos, which was something which the Alter Rebbe did often. Picks up his head and he tells Rabbi Gabriel, the Alter Rebbe asked him, where are these coins from? He said, that's from my wife. And he said that my wife went and she pawned her jewelry and she gave me the package. It was a sealed package. And the Alter Rebbe then said, he quoted a Gemara in Sanhedrin. It says, Bas dina, batal dina. Bas dina means if the din it rests overnight, so it becomes batal. If there's a din, if there's a quarrel, but once it becomes old, it becomes batal. The word bas can mean rests overnight, but bas also means a woman. So bas dina, batal dina. The woman of din was mevatel the din. In other words, you don't have to worry anymore about what's going on, the din that's against you. But then when he saw the Alter Rebbe saw the sparkle, so he asked what, he says he doesn't know. Alter Rebbe put his head down and he lifted it up and he said, in the Nidava for the Mishkan there was gold and there was silver and there was copper. But nothing sparkled like the copper that was donated by the women. And from that the kir was made. And even though the kir was the last of the kelim of the Beis HaMikdash in the Mishkan that was constructed, it was the first one that was used every single day. Alter Rebbe picked up his head and said, gave him a lot of brachas. He said, go home. He says, you'll have a child. And he told him, you'll be noisachein by everyone. You'll find favor in the eyes of everyone. Close up your diet, and you'll have arichas yamim. Give him bracha of arichas yamim. He said, close your store. He had a store, and go and start dealing in diamonds and jewelry. And he sent them home. And Gabriel went home to his wife, Chana Rivka, and he asked his wife, what was with why were the coins sparkling? And she says that before I sent them off to the Rebbe, I polished them. Polished them until they were sparkling like the stars, she said.
What was her intention?
And she said, my intention was that with this way, if the tzedakah that sparkles, our mazel should shine and sparkle also.
Oh, I see.
Smart woman. But the Rebbe says that's the difference between men and women. The men, when women do something, it's with the bells and the whistles. It sparkles. A man has to prepare some food, he prepares some food. It'll taste good, baby. But the woman, the way it's set on the plate and everything is nice. And that's my wife's grandmother. She would actually shine all the crowns.
What?
The crowns on the Sifrei Torah in 770. Yeah. And she would also polish the coins that the Rebbe would use for Machzah Shekel. My wife's grandmother, every year she would polish them. Polish those coins. Women have a thing for things have to be, it's not just that it has to be functional, it has to be beautiful, it has to be sparkle, right? It has to have the yoifi to it. This Rabbi Gabriel, he sold his store, he entered diamonds, he became very wealthy. He became so popular that people started calling him, and that was the name that stuck, Rabbi Gabriel Noisachein. That was his name.
Still around?
He's not still around. He passed away. What do you mean?
His charity organization.
He didn't have a charity organization.
No?
Didn't say that.
Oh no, you didn't say that?
No. He passed away in the year Tafrei Shvav, which is in the year 1846, at the age of 110, which is a ridiculous age for today, and back then was even
rare.
Yeah.
People died young, 40, 50 years old.
Yeah. And he had, and I don't remember if he had a child or children. He definitely had, and he saw many Iggeres, and it all came from the tzedakah. But not only the tzedakah, but the tzedakah that was polished and that was sparkling. But this is one story that the Frierdiker Rebbe says about a particular chassid, but it gives us in general a glimpse of life back then, that people a lot of times they were asked to give, and they were asked to give a lot. And these letters that Alter Rebbe would send, and encouraging chassidim to give, many times gave them a boost, gave them a big boost. And because it's chassidus, even if you want to give a Torah spin, so in general we talk about, the reward you get for giving tzedakah or the Gan Eden. Baal Shem, chassidim aren't that into these things. If you'll see the letters, every letter, the Alter Rebbe talks about the spiritual benefits of giving tzedakah. He knew as chassidim, he knew how to motivate them. In this letter that we're going to learn, which is Siman Gimel, by the way, before we start, just the Siman, just one quick connection to Hanukkah. So the Magen Avram actually brings down that the minig is on Hanukkah to give extra tzedakah. In fact, there are those who argue that is the origins of Hanukkah Geld. The origins of Hanukkah Geld is that since on Hanukkah you're supposed to give tzedakah, so as not to embarrass the poor people, that you're giving only to them, you give Hanukkah Geld, so you give to everyone, including the poor people, and that's a way of covering up for the tzedakah and giving tzedakah in a more respectful way. But there's definitely a connection between tzedakah and Hanukkah. So here we're starting to learn about this. We're starting to learn about this letter about tzedakah and the 8th day of Hanukkah, which is the fullness of Hanukkah, which is very appropriate. And since we're anyways here, we're talking about Hanukkah and the 8th day of Hanukkah. So for many of us, unfortunately, we light the menorah on the 8th night, and we kind of forget it's Hanukkah. Okay, so tomorrow we still have a Kriyas HaTorah. It's a long Kriyas HaTorah, and we have Hallel. There's Valanism still, but by tomorrow afternoon, no one is already thinking about Hanukkah anymore. Tomorrow morning, it's pretty much, even tonight. I think I might have mentioned to you in previous years, there's a joke that, there's Machlokes in Beis Shammai and Beis Hillel, how many candles you light. Beis Hillel says 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, and Beis Shammai says the other way around. What's the rationale of Beis Shammai? So someone once said in jest, the Beis Shammai is talking about the reality. The reality is that on the first day of Hanukkah, everyone is ultra excited about the Yom Tov. So we light all 8 candles. Time the second night comes, our enthusiasm wanes, diminishes. Okay, 7 candles, 6. By the time it comes the last night of Hanukkah, we're all watkid out and donuted out, and we're ready to move on. We have 1 candle, and that is, unfortunately, that is talking the reality by many. Hanukkah starts with a bang and ends with a fizzle. What's interesting is that the 8th day of Hanukkah is called Zois Hanukkah, because tomorrow on the Kriyas HaTorah we read Zois Chanukah Sanasbeach. But what does Zois Hanukkah mean? Zois Hanukkah, this is Hanukkah. The 8th day is if we're talking about when do we have the fullness of Hanukkah, the fullness of all 8 candles, and the fullness of the miracles on the 8th day. And in Kedusha we have this idea of Ma'ila HaKodesh, of moving up in Kodesh. So Kapanim today it's the fullest day of Hanukkah, and if Hanukkah there's a minute to give tzedakah, so today should be tonight and tomorrow. Make sure Taka to be mashlam to give tzedakah. What's the connection between tzedakah and Hanukkah? So, well, there are many connections. The Alter Rebbe and Maimer and Torah Er gives a very, very lengthy and deep connection, which we're not going to go into right now. On a very simple level, one thing about Hanukkah is that Hanukkah represents the idea of eternity, which this also has to do with Zois Hanukkah and specifically the Kriyas HaTorah of tomorrow. We know that tomorrow we read about Bahaloischa es Haneres. So Rashi says over there, why is Lama Nismacha? Why is it that the parsha about lighting the menorah comes right after the parsha about the Chanukah Sanasim, the inaugural gifts are given by the Nesiim? So Rashi says, because Aaron Cholsha Daite, when he saw that all the Nesiim were bringing, and he wasn't bringing, so he was offended. He was upset by this. So that's why at that point he got the mitzvah of the menorah, and the words of Chazal, the Eibusha told him, Shalcha G'daylam Shalham, yours is greater than theirs, because you're lighting the menorah. So the Ramban famously asks on this, that's the only thing that Aaron had was lighting the menorah? The Kehanim, they did 1,000,000 avodas every single day. Every single carbon that was brought by him. Was lighting the menorah the greatest thing? How about bringing ketores? How about the fact that in Yom Kippur, once a year, Aaron HaKohen went into the Kodesh HaKodashim, which no other Yid was allowed to? Why was Hashem menachem him specifically with the neiros of the menorah? And the Ramban famously answers that there's a very deep thing going on over here. When Hashem told Aaron, that yours is greater than theirs because you have Sha'ata Madlik Saneres, you're lighting the candles. That's a reference to the candles of the Hanukkah menorah. The Hanukkah menorah, the miracle of Hanukkah, that was brought to us, Curtis Yavu, who was the one who gave it to us? Al Yidei Kehanach HaKodesh, the children of Aaron. And the message that Hashem was telling Aaron is, yours is greater than theirs. Why? Because they're bringing Chanukas HaMizbeach. They are inaugurating this Mizbeach. But you know what? How long is this Mizbeach going to last for? It's going to last for some 400 years in the Mishkan, another 800 years in the Beis HaMikdash, and then it's going to be gone. So their whole offering is for something that's temporary. Shal Chag Gedolah Mishalham, yours is greater because the Neiros Chanukah are never bottled. Neiros Chanukah are eternal. Even in Golos, we're lighting the Neiros of Chanukah also. And that's why the Eibishter, that's why Hashem consoled them specifically with the lights of Chanukah. So Chanukah represents the idea of eternity. No matter how dark it is outside, we still light the menorah. Not only no matter how dark, we dafka light it when it's dark, and we light it at the door to symbolize that there is no darkness that can extinguish the Hanukkah menorah. The menorah in the Beis HaMikdash was extinguished for 2,000 years now, but the Hanukkah menorah candles are still burning. Yimois HaMashiach, Mashiach also represents the idea of eternity, because once Mashiach comes, it's going to be a Geula She'ein Achareha Galus. So that's why there's a special connection between Hanukkah and Mashiach. Because Hanukkah represents the idea of eternity, and Mashiach also represents this idea of Nitzchias. What brings Mashiach? So Chazal tell us, Gedei Tzedakah Shemekareves Sagula, and Gedei Tzedakah Shemizerez Sagula. Tzedakah brings Mashiach. So that's why Hanukkah, which is so connected to Mashiach, they're both the idea of Nitzchias. We give Tzedakah on Hanukkah in order to bring about Mashiach and to use the special koyach of Hanukkah to bring about Mashiach. Now, and with that, let's now begin. We're not going to begin inside, but let's begin the conversation.
Outside.
We're going to do outside a little more. Yeah,
inside.
We'll see.
I thought you.
No, we're starting, but I want to introduce this first by outside.
I was about to.
We know there's a rule, Chazal tell us, Schar mitzvah b'hai alma leka. There is no reward for mitzvahs in this world. The reward that we get for doing mitzvahs, we experience in Olam Haba. However, there's an exception to this rule. The exception to this rule is the mitzvah of tzedakah. And as we say every single morning in the brachas, we say, Elu dvarim she'adam eichel peirseim ba'elam hazav akeren kayemes le'elam haba. There's certain things that akeren kayemes le'elam haba. The principle remains safe in elam haba. In other words, the remaining reward for these mitzvahs also is not in this world. But the peirseim, the fruits of which we eat in this world, the dividends, the keren, the principle, the actual reward also is in elam haba. But there are certain mitzvahs in which we enjoy also the reward here in this world, the dividends of the reward we enjoy in this world, and that is the mitzvah tzedakah. Or different forms of milas chasadim as described, bikar chelam, havai sameis, havai shalom, all different sorts of tzedakah. Tzedakah is something which we receive the reward for. We receive the reward for that in this world. And this is something which we believe. As the pasuk says, Malva Hashem Chaynan Dal, that when you are giving, when you're Chaynan Dal, when you're kind to a poor person, you're being Malva Hashem. All you're doing is you're lending money to Hashem. You get repaid in this world. Again, in every other mitzvah, we can't expect to be repaid in this world. You spend a lot of money on nice esrog, it's beautiful, it's amazing, but not necessarily will you be repaid. In Olam Haba, you'll get an incredible reward, but not in this world. Tzedakah, you get repaid in this world. In fact, there's the famous pasuk in Malachi The Psukim in Malachi where Hashem says, Haviu, as a meiser. Hashem says, bring the meiser to Beis HaOitzer, to my treasury, bring the meiser. V'yeteref bevesi, there should be food in my house for the Kihanim and for the poor. And Hashem says over there, Hashem says, I want you to try me out. Please, test me. Test me. Give me the money and test me. And see if I won't open up for you the windows of heaven. And I'll pour bracha upon you. Ad blidai, as the Gemara explains, until your lips will become tired from saying enough, enough, enough. The Eibishter says, not only does the Eibishter allow us to test us when it comes to tzedakah, the Eibishter actually encourages it. He says, please, give tzedakah and try me out. You'll see, I'll give you I'll pay you back. So again, tzedakah is one mitzvah which, even though we say that schar mitzvah b'hal maleka, in this world we don't experience the reward for mitzvah, tzedakah is the exception to that rule. The question is why? So it's a question that today people look at you like you're strange when you ask that question. What do you mean why? Of course, tzedakah is the most important mitzvah. We live in a world where today, tikkun olam and social justice and right. So of course, tzedakah is the most important mitzvah, but that's not a satisfactory answer. What does that mean? Tzedakah is the most important mitzvah. Why? What makes it the most important mitzvah? Who said? So that's number one. We have to understand why is it that tzedakah, specifically of all mitzvahs, we got rewarded for it in the Olam Hazeh. Well, other mitzvahs aren't important. That's number one. We also, if you want to go a little deeper, we know that today with the new technologies, so we have nun mishalom to understand the way things work in Yiddishkeit and Torah mitzvahs. In 1917, when there was the revolution in Russia, and the Tsar was overthrown. So one chassid saw another chassid who was a deep thinker in Chassidus. He was crying. Asked him, why are you crying? That stupid anti-Semite. There's plenty of blood on his hands. The Tsar had plenty of Jewish blood on his hands, different pogroms. What are you crying about? He said, I'm crying because I'm losing my muscle for Sfiras HaMalchus. In other words, when we talk about the Malchus of Hashem, Donald Trump, Joe Biden, that's not a melech. Not a melech. We really don't have a concept of what a melech is. The idea of fear of a king, the idea of understanding what it means to be bottled a king, we have no. Why? Because we live in democracies. So this chassid was crying not because he felt bad for the Tsar, but because to him the Tsar served a purpose, that the Tsar was a mashal for the Eibishter. How many times we're learning a Rashi, we're learning a Medrash that says, Mashal lemelach basar v'dam, right? How many times have you bumped into that? If you don't know what a melech basar v'dam is, you're not really fully understanding that mashal. So the same thing is, some mishalim, with time they leave us, but we get new mishalim. Today, it used to be that when you went to war, so you had soldiers and they went in the battlefield. If you went 2,000 years ago, so they were busy, with swords, or maybe throwing with spears, or maybe throwing you throw spears also, right? Lances at each other. Maybe if you're very highly sophisticated, they had some sort of catapults, right? They throw big boulders. Today, battle doesn't happen on the battlefield. This guy, this nuclear scientist, Yamach Shemai, who was killed, right? They say by the Israelis a few weeks ago.
Yeah.
So we don't know exactly how he was killed, but at least the Iranians are claiming that there was no one on the ground. There are those who say that it's not true, but the Iranians are claiming it was all done remotely with
whereabouts,
with satellite technology and different stuff. But that's really, there's the United States, we have army bases. You go to a place in Nevada, you go to a place in Nebraska, you go somewhere, and you have a bunch of people sitting in a room at computer screens, and one of them pushes a button, and in Afghanistan, a bomb falls and someone is killed. Now imagine someone who lived 300 years ago walks into the room and sees people pushing buttons. And you say, you know why I'm pushing a button? Because 15,000 miles away from here, I just killed someone. They'd lock you up and put you in the mental institution, right?
And with the drones.
Sorry, what?
They do it with the drones. Their offices.
Yeah,
They see
yeah. Drones and missiles and yeah.
In the office. Picturing that.
But we've been doing this for thousands of years. When you put up a mezuzah, when you make kiddush, you're pushing a button, and the impact is in Olam Haba, in the higher worlds, and that's Chai Mitzvah B'Al Maleka, because we're creating realities in higher worlds, and we're bringing in oir, as we'll learn at length in Hashem in this very letter. We're creating different realities on different spiritual dimensions and different spiritual planes, which right now we can't experience. So we're in the control room, and we are making huge things. Every single time we're doing a mitzvah, we're causing tremendous movements and tremendous impact in the higher worlds, but we don't experience it. With the exception of the mitzvah of tzedakah. The mitzvah of tzedakah, even here in the control room, we also feel the benefits of it also. But why is it? What is it about the mitzvah of tzedakah? We know that the reward for everything is an automatic consequence and reaction of the action. What is it about the mitzvah of tzedakah which makes it unique and that we get the schar over here in this world? That is what this letter from the Alter Rebbe is going to be discussing, why it is that of all the mitzvahs, dafke tzedakah, regarding tzedakah, we say that we have the reward in this world. By the way, not the main reward. The main reward still remains in the world to come. The Karen Kayemes Leilam Haba, but the payers, why is it that we have the payers? So in order to understand the uniqueness of the mitzvah tzedakah, we first have to understand really the function of mitzvahs in general. So Alter Rebbe is going to discuss the function of mitzvahs in general, and then we're going to understand what's unique about the mitzvah tzedakah. The Alter Rebbe is basing this letter on a pasuk. Vayil bash tzedakah, yeah, inside, page Kuf Daled, opposite of page 206. Vayil bash tzedakah kesiryan, v'koiva Yeshua bereshe. This pasuk is a pasuk in Yeshaya. It's a nevuah about when Mashiach comes, talking about Hashem, how he's going to wage battle against the enemies of Klal Yisrael. And the pasuk says about Hashem, Vayil ba tzedakah, Hashem will wear tzedakah kesiryan, like a coat of armor. V'koiva Yeshua beroshei, and a helmet. He'll have a helmet made up of Yeshua on his head. So when you go to battle, you wear armor, a coat of armor. The more fancy term for this is a coat of mail. M-A-I-L, coat of mail. And you wear a coat of armor and you wear a helmet. So Hashem also will be wearing armor and a helmet. The only thing is that the armor Hashem will be wearing will be made up of tzedakah, and this helmet will be made up of Yeshua. V'darshu Razal, and Chazal tell us, Ma Syrian Zekol Klipa V'Klipa Mitzarefes Syrian Gadil. Just like this coat of armor, every single one of the scales combines to become one large coat of armor. Af tzedakah, the same thing, it's tzedakah called pruta Mitzarefes Lacheshmen Gadil. Every single penny that you give is mitzaref to become, it accumulates into a large cheshbon. Pirush meaning, Shasirian Asui Kaskasim Al Nekavim. This coat of armor is made up of scales that cover up holes. V'hei Meginim, these scales, they protect Shalayikonis Chaitz Ben Nekavim, so that an arrow should not enter in the holes. So Kachu Ma'aseh Tzedakah, and the same thing is with the Ma'aseh Tzedakah. So if you want to maybe go on the internet and you can look it up, what is a coat of mail, and you'll see the way it worked anciently is you had a coat that was made up of pretty much of holes. It was a thing made up of holes, like links, like chain. It was like you're wearing like made up of a chain, and then every single hole was covered up by a little piece of metal, which is the scales.
Fish.
What?
Like the scales of the fish.
Right. So this gives you a mobility. If you had armor, which was one piece, that would make you
Very
immobile.
immobile.
You're right. So this way, yeah, you have complete
you can
movement
move,
because it's like But the problem is if it's chains, every chain the link has a hole in it. So every single link has in it a little metal thing hanging on it to protect, so that an arrow comes.
Pierce
Right.
it through. Okay.
So you have these little pieces of metal that are this big. Right? So you have probably, I don't know, hundreds of them covering up the entire body. Each one of these is a scale. Now, imagine a person picks up one of these things and says, you see this? This is going to protect me. This is protecting me. Really? Well, this.
Crazy.
What? Yeah. This.
Crazy.
But with another one, and another one, and another one.
Mistaref.
Right? Mitzaref. So all these little pieces of metal, they're mitzaref to a complete coat of armor which protects. The same thing stuck also. Imagine you take a penny or a nickel, you say, this has any importance to it? This is going to protect me? But yeah. This and this and this, one penny and another nickel and a dime and another penny, and suddenly you have a big cheshbon which also protects you. So that's why Chazal called tzedakah, vayil bat tzedakah. That's why the Yeshaya says vayil bat tzedakah kisiri. And that what is Hashem wearing as his armor? He's wearing tzedakah. What's the connection between tzedakah and armor? That both of them, they're made up of tiny little pieces, which eventually they comprise a larger unit. Yes, Yossi. Sorry? Yeshua means salvation.
Salvation, yeah.
So what's the words?
The koiva is a helmet
Helmet, yeah.
A helmet made of
of Yeshua. We have to understand what that means. We will. The beauty of it is that I'm not a person who really appreciates or enjoys poetry.
Very difficult.
What?
Nevi'im are very hard words.
But nevertheless,
I can
Yeshaya is special. Yeshaya is special. You read it, the words, the metaphors, the way he describes, it's even for a non-poetic person, it's special. But in poetry, by definition, you use words for impact, you use words liberally. There's even the word poetic license, which poetic license by definition means it's not precise, taking some license. But Chazal, every single word, if we say that the koiva is made up of Yeshua, and if we say that the tzedakah, the Syrian, the armor is made up of tzedakah, there's incredible depth in every single one of these things, even on the simple level in the Gemara. And now, obviously, the Alter Rebbe is going to take this much, much deeper to understand the connections. We're going to learn how tzedakah, tzedakah has holes which are covered up. I mean, every single thing is going to be exactly precise. It's amazing how, because the wisdom within Torah is infinite, so you have a line, a sentence, which seems to say one thing, and there's layer upon layer upon layer of wisdom and meaning and depth. And the Eibishter, how much wisdom and depth is hidden in one pasuk, in one line. It's like a diamond that sparkles and all the different facets, right, and aspects.
Have 42 aspects.
Yeah. So this is an infinite amount. So the first, on a very simple level, we have to know that tzedakah is mitzarav v'cheshbon gadol, and therefore, in general, in tzedakah, this is a very important thing to know. And the Alter Rebbe is going to talk about this more at length in a later letter, not over here, but in a later letter, the Alter Rebbe is going to talk about it much later. Where that in tzedakah, people tend to think of tzedakah as it being about the amount. How much do I give? Okay, I give this week I gave $100. Okay, next week I have to try to give a little more. But actually, and this is based on the way the Rambam understands in Pirkei Avos the words Hakoil if Yirev HaMaisa. Just as important as it is to give a nice amount of tzedakah dollar-wise, it's about how many times did you give tzedakah. Not how much did I give this past week, but how many times did I give tzedakah this past week. And you think, well, it's a nickel, it's a dime, it's a quarter, yeah. Keep on giving, and even if the amount is the same, it ends up being the same. These are the pruta, these are the small coins that add up to this entire coat of armor, this cheshbon gadol. Okay, ubir de inyan. Let's explain what this all means. What does this all mean? This idea of tzedakah being compared to a coat of armor. Tzedakah is greater than all the mitzvahs. As we mentioned earlier, right? Tzedakah, we get the reward for it in this world. So in order to understand the greatness of tzedakah, first we have to understand the greatness, what are all mitzvahs? What are all mitzvahs about? And then we can understand the uniqueness of tzedakah. Shemehen nasam levushim la neshama. And every time we do a mitzvah, what we're doing is we're creating garments for our neshama. The garments for our neshama that we're creating through doing mitzvahs, they come from the infinite light of Hashem, that which is known as Sevel Kalalman, the light which transcends all of creation. As we explained the meaning of the words, of the terms of Malak Kalalman and Sevel Kalalman, the Lakuti Amarim, Ayin Sham. By the way, remember I mentioned that these letters aren't dated, so they go through these letters trying to find different clues for when the letters might be. So in this letter, this was one of the clues. Alter Rebbe refers to L'Kutei Amarim. So that means that it was after Tanya was printed. So that means that it was already after 1796, that we know. So they have different methods of how they try to establish the dates of the letters, finding different clues of this sort. And this is B'Sarusa Dilatata. This is through an awakening from below. He mitzvahs Hashem by us doing the mitzvahs of Hashem, V'Ratzna Elyon Baruch Hu, and the Ratzna Elyon. Earlier on in Tanya and Perikei and L'Kutei Amarim, the Alter Rebbe already brings down over there from the Zohar that it says that when the neshama goes up to heaven, so the neshama he says over there, he brings down not from the Zohar, from the Eitz Chaim, that the levushim of the neshamas in Gan Eden are made of the mitzvahs. And the neshama goes up to Gan Eden, it needs garments. The garments are the mitzvahs it does in this world. And the Torah, hi hamazon. The food for the neshamas in Gan Eden is the Torah that they learned. And their garments, their clothing, are the mitzvahs that they did. So every single time when we do a mitzvah, we are creating a garment for our neshama. What is the purpose of the garment of this neshama? The garment that the neshama has. So in Gan Eden, what?
What's the function of a garment? For something that's spiritual, totally spiritual, not physical altogether.
Right. Well, obviously we're talking also about a spiritual garment, but just like physically the garment
protects.
The garment protects you. So, for example, tonight when it's very cold,
you wear a few layers.
Right. But for example, let's say that if you're walking out in the summer and it's in the sun, and you'll wear a hat to protect you also from the heat.
The heat and sun, yeah.
So in Gan Eden there's a lot of heat. A lot of heat. We think in Gehenna there's heat, right? But in Gan Eden, in Gan Eden there's also plenty of heat. What do I mean by heat? There's a gilui, tremendous gilui of Hashem, tremendous revelation of Hashem. One which the neshama on its own is not able to, would not be able to handle. So it needs a garment to protect itself, and that it should be able to process and to be able to remain in Gan Eden and be able to enjoy that gilui without it being destroyed by it.
How did it manage beforehand? Before it was incorporated into a human.
Right, it didn't have that same gilui then.
It was chelik
Elakam Mimal.
So I don't understand what changed here.
So there's before the neshama was created, you mean?
Well, it's part of God. It's a chelik of God.
So once part of Hashem, then it's part of Hashem. Then there's no issues. But once it's created, it becomes a distinct identity. At this point, and when the neshama goes back to Gan Eden, it doesn't lose its identity. It retains its identity, but at this point, it is a created entity, and therefore the gili of the Eir itself would be too much for it. So it needs a garment. So what is the garment? The garment is the mitzvahs that we do. And why is that? Because as the Alter Rebbe says, mitzvahs come from Soiv Kalaman. Torah comes from a Malach Kalaman. Soiv Kalaman, as we mentioned, is the level of light from Hashem which does not adapt to creation. It doesn't tailor itself to creation. It doesn't come down on our terms. It always remains on its terms. Whereas Malach Kalaman is the light of Hashem which enters and adapts itself to creation. Torah absolutely adapts to creation. The biggest proof is that we understand it. The fact that we're learning it, something which originated in Hashem's Chachma, and even higher than that, and now it's something that comes into the world, and something that we can understand, and something that we can process. So that's something which, and that's why it's Mozen. That's why it's called Mozen. It's the food, because it's something that we process internally. We learn Torah, we understand Torah, we appreciate Torah. Mitzvahs, on the other hand, mitzvahs is not Hashem engaging the world on its terms. When a king tells the subject, go do this, the king isn't bothering to lower himself down to the subject and to explain why he's doing it and to give the subject an appreciation for it. The mitzvah is, you are following the command of the king. He is the king, I am the subject, and I'm going to do what he wants. That's called makif, that's called being transcendent, that's called remaining aloof. As opposed to Torah, which does not remain descendant, that's the Eibishter actually lowering himself down to us and teaching us and coming down to us on our level. So the garment that we have, which is again, it's from Seva Kalalman, because it's not something that we internalize. But when we do a mitzvah, what we're doing is we're creating for ourselves a garment which is from Seva Kalalman, and therefore when we go to Gan Eden, we are able to then handle the tremendous Gilui, the revelation of Hashem's light in Gan Eden, because we're protected by this light, by the...
Yeah.
Right. You know, lahavdil, not it's the same thing because it's a negative term, but sometimes you need something of the sort of the thing in order to protect yourself against it. So obviously today what comes to mind is the big news there is the vaccine, and the concept of vaccine is that you take a little of it in order to protect yourself against it. I'm not trying to compare the Aryan stuff to an infectious disease, but the concept remains that because the mitzvahs come from the Aryan stuff, the mitzvahs are Hashem's Ratzon, which is Seva Kalalman, and when we go to Gan Eden, what we're going to have is a gili of that Aryan stuff, so that mitzvah forms a protective shield around us from the Aryan stuff. I'm trying to think if there's a better example of the idea of when you take a little of something, it protects you from that, even in a not necessarily in a negative way, but sometimes in a positive way.
It's like a homeopathic concept.
Homeopathic concept. Okay, I have to study up my. Yeah. Okay.
Yeah.
So this is what happens every single time a person does a mitzvah. What you're doing is you're, in effect, you are insulating yourself and giving yourself the koyach, the resilience, you might want to say, that's needed in order that when the neshama goes up to Gan Eden, you should be able to enjoy the gili oyer that is over there. However, as we will see, it's not direct. This levush that comes to your neshama doesn't come directly from the Aryan stuff, but rather, first it enters and chains down through the worlds, and through the Mamal Kalalman. But that already begins a whole new topic, and we will, Mr. Hashem, continue on that next week. So just to recap where we are right now. We're trying to understand the uniqueness of tzedakah and why it is that of all the mitzvahs we say, specifically by tzedakah, we say schar mitzvah b'ha'al malaka, that there is no reward. And to understand that, we first have to understand in general the function of mitzvahs, and what we've established till this point is that what we know about mitzvahs is that mitzvahs are about giving us a garment, which the neshama then in Gan Eden is able to wear, and thereby be able to enjoy the Gilui Elokos, which is in Gan Eden. We're going to further explore this process next week, and then we still have to continue on and figure out on what is unique about the mitzvah of tzedakah. Afriel Chanukah and a good Shabbos.